Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive data mystery, one that has literally obscured the reality of rural destitution for millions of people. We're looking at a profound statistical illusion, a bureaucratic flaw that has fundamentally altered how we understand poverty, land ownership, and agricultural survival.
So how did a simple survey design flaw basically erase millions of landless farmers from the official record? Well, if you were a policymaker just looking at official reports, you probably wouldn't think there's a crisis at all. But today, we're putting on our investigator hats. We're going to see exactly how the system failed and how a seemingly minor shift in data collection managed to wipe the real, everyday struggles of millions of agricultural workers right off the books.
Section 1. The 10% Myth. The official narrative presents rural landlessness as a marginal issue.
To wrap our heads around this hidden crisis, we first have to understand that official narrative. According to the widely cited 2003 to 2004 National Sample Survey Organization report, specifically their 59th round of data collection, a mere 10.04% of rural Indian households do not own land. Just 10%. I mean, if you take that number at face value, structural landlessness looks like a totally marginal issue, right? Just a relatively small gap in a system that's otherwise working fine.
Okay, let's dive into this, because as we start peeling back this official ledger, we find that this comforting 10% figure is built on a shockingly bad foundation of data. It rests on a fundamental misclassification that completely skews our entire understanding of what it actually means to own land in a rural agricultural economy.
Section 2. Anatomy of a flawed metric. Conflating dwellings with the means of production.
To really grasp how the bureaucrats broke the data, you have to look at how they define the word ownership. And here is the glaring error. Owning the exact patch of dirt that your house sits on, your homestead land, is absolutely not the same as owning productive land. You can't farm the dirt under your living room, right? Yet the official survey completely ignored this reality, lumping both of these entirely different things into one broad ownership category.
By conflating the non-productive dirt under a tiny hut with actual workable agricultural fields, the government artificially transformed millions of destitute laborers into quote-unquote landowners on paper. It's almost like a magic trick. If you lived in a small dwelling, boom, congratulations, the survey counted you as a landowner. This completely masked the fact that you possessed absolutely no means of agricultural production to feed your family.
If we step back and look at the timeline, the older 1992 survey, the 48th round, actually tried to make a distinction between marginal kitchen gardens and primary agricultural holdings. They separated out the homesteads. But then, the 2003 survey actively destroyed this distinction. It radically changed the format. They logged plot-by-plot data, sure, but they utterly failed to record what that land was actually being used for.
And this perfectly illustrates the degradation of the data. Crucial information on land use and irrigation status was entirely dropped. You can literally see the ledger breaking down. By removing the context of how the land was being utilized, the scope of our agrarian understanding was severely narrowed. They were essentially hiding a massive crisis behind a dry statistical technicality.
Section 3. The true scale of inequality. Correcting the ledger to reveal the hidden majority.
So what happens when you actually correct this ledger? When researcher Vikas Raval isolated land that can genuinely be used for production, meaning land other than just homesteads, the real landlessness rate completely explodes. It jumps from that tiny 10% up to over 41%. Let that sink in. Over 40% of rural households lack the productive soil necessary for agricultural survival. That is just a staggering difference. And honestly, the trend is moving in the exact wrong direction. Despite decades of sweeping economic liberalization in India, absolute landlessness actively jumped by a massive 6 percentage points in just over a decade between those two surveys. The fundamental agrarian asset base is getting more concentrated, not less.
When you plot out this corrected data, the true Gini coefficient, which is a measure of inequality, stands at an extreme 0.76. What does that mean in reality? It means a tiny elite controls vast, disproportionate tracts of productive soil, while the base, representing nearly half of all households, are squeezed onto just 22% of the total land area.
Section 4. India's 3 agrarian profiles. How the statistical technicality blurs regional realities.
Of course, this statistical illusion ends up blurring some very different regional realities. For instance, you have what's known as the Kerala anomaly.
Here, post-reformed homesteads are widely used for highly productive commercial crop cultivation. That is a complete contrast to a pure survival garden in other states, where marginal crop production is purely for desperate, everyday household subsistence. On top of that, you have wealthy landowners in states like Punjab shifting their residences onto distinct parts of massive agricultural plots. A single flawed survey methodology just cannot capture these wildly different realities fairly. Across the nation, these distinct regional realities build into three main agrarian profiles. First, you have the unreformed breadbaskets, which boast advanced agriculture but suffer from extreme inequality. Then you have the reformed states, which had successful historical land ceilings and have minimal large holdings today. And finally, you have the dense East, characterized by high population density and moderate landlessness.
Now, when you look at those unreformed breadbaskets, we're talking states like Tamil Nadu, Punjab, Haryana, and Andhra Pradesh. The inequality is so severe it actually crosses the 0.8 Gini danger line. In Tamil Nadu alone, a staggering 64.5% lack productive land. This represents a near total monopolization of agricultural assets by a wealthy minority in states that were completely untouched by land reform.
Section 5. The 15 million acre solution. Unlocking massive redistribution potential. Okay, so we've seen the true scale of the problem. But as statistical sleuths, we've also uncovered the hidden treasure that could actually fix it. If a uniform ceiling of just 20 acres were strictly applied across all states, it would unlock a breathtaking 15 million acres of surplus redistributable land. To put that into perspective for a second, this single reserve is more than 3 times the total amount of land that has ever been redistributed under all historical land reform programs in the country combined.
This brilliantly illustrates a really vital reality. Rural destitution is not an issue of absolute scarcity. There is land. It is entirely a crisis of hoarded surplus. We literally have 41% of rural households forced to survive without a single acre, weighed directly against massive single estates that exceed 20 acres in size.
And what's incredibly fascinating is exactly where this unfulfilled potential lies. Just 8 states hold the vast majority of this surplus. Rajasthan alone is hoarding nearly 6 million acres of surplus, redistributable land. That's followed by states like Madhya Pradesh and Andhra Pradesh, which hold almost 2 million acres each. The potential for immense life-changing reform is sitting right there.
And look, state-led redistribution is not some abstract pie-in-the-sky theory. We have the proof. States like West Bengal, Kerala, and Tripura have already practically eliminated extreme holding sizes. In those states, the availability of surplus land over a 20-acre ceiling is almost non-existent today. Why? Because they demonstrated that state-led land reform is a highly effective mechanism for dismantling these agrarian monopolies.
The paramount lesson here is this: we cannot distribute what we refuse to accurately measure. As long as official statistics continue to mask structural inequality by conflating a tiny dirt hut with a functioning farm, we can never deliver justice. And we certainly can't enact the aggressive land reform agenda that is so undeniably necessary. I want to leave you with a provocative thought to ponder. If over 40% of rural India, we're talking millions upon millions of destitute people, were essentially erased from the official record by a simple survey design flaw, what other global emergencies are we failing to measure correctly? What else is hiding right in plain sight, just waiting for the ledger to be corrected? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the data.